Here at Lady Farmer, we talk about so many different aspects of slow and sustainable living, a subject matter that can at times feel confusing, overwhelming, even misleading. And that's why a few years ago, we set out to write a book that might be a guide for those seeking a life of beauty, simplicity, and sustainability.
We're thrilled to be able to offer you our own small guide for cultivating slow living, sustainable simplicity close to home, available in our online marketplace. In the book, we've woven an easy-to-digest narrative of stories, recipes, tips, resources, ideas, and reflection. This collection of essays and resources will guide you to think about your own relationship to the planet, what you eat, what you wear, and how you live a sustainable lifestyle. It also contains a 21-day slow living challenge of daily thought exercises to lead you in the process.
For you Good Dirt listeners, we are offering free shipping of this wonderful little book with the code THEGOODDIRT in our online marketplace. So use the code THEGOODDIRT, THEGOODDIRT, at checkout when you go to purchase your copy of The Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living in our online marketplace for free shipping. That's The Good Dirt at the Lady Farmer online marketplace for free shipping on The Lady Farmer Guide to Slow Living. We hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, everybody.
Our holistic approach in homesteading is it's not about me or you or we raise pigs and just pigs. It's all of this holistic approach of bringing everything together and understanding how all of us matter and all of us moving in this direction is important. And if we just get really big and we're just doing it, that's not actually necessarily making a difference for the whole.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now. The farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Hello, everyone. Today we have a treat for you. Returning from a year ago, we're having another conversation with Krista Arias and her daughter Fia from Tierra Soul. Tierra Soul is both a physical place. It's a homestead located in Magdalena, New Mexico. It's a place of learning, gathering, and mentoring, and it's an online space as well. Both encompass a place for seekers to come and be inspired, to learn, a sacred circle to help others remember the old world soul of food, family, and farming. In this conversation, we get an update on happenings at the Homestead in New Mexico and plans for a special gathering in Magdalena, an event they're piloting this year as a holistic homesteading festival. You'll also be hearing about an online learning opportunity that they've been developing for several years now, and one that I am personally familiar with as a participant from 10 years ago. It's called Lazy Lady Living, Tierra Soul's 8-week online holistic homesteading program that's a guide through all the things the Arias family has been living and teaching for almost 20 years now. Soulful permaculture, ethical business, earth medicine, community ceremony, sustainable economy, and traditional food and nutrition are some of the many topics covered in this program. Lazy Lady Living is an introduction into all that they do, and they can't wait to share the knowledge they've gained from their own trial and error to help you find peace and simplicity in your own homesteading endeavors wherever you are. If this speaks to you as something that might enhance your dreams of living in more connection to your food, your community, and the earth, in sync with the seasons, they want you to know that the program is now on sale. If you join before October 30th, you can get more than 50% off the program cost. Just go to tierrasoul.com for all the details, and we'll link that in the show notes as well. Today, you'll hear me talk about my experience with lazy lady living and how when I heard about it, I knew it was something I wanted to experience. I'm so grateful for the information and knowledge that I gained from this program, so much so that I've revisited the material again and again over the years. And I'm so grateful to have met Krista and Fia through Lazy Lady Living and to be able to speak to them once again about the beautiful work they are doing through Tierra Soul. So here they are. Enjoy. So hello, Krista and Fia. We're so glad to have you back here on The Good Dirt. We had our first conversation with you about a year ago, and we're so happy to have y'all back.
We're excited too. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We love what you're doing, and it's always just wonderful to have a conversation with a fellow slow thinker.
Isn't it though? It's just fun to talk about these things with people.
Yeah. And often in the conversations, we find new things out. So it's really great.
So it never gets old over here. And Thea, and since we talked to you last, you've turned 18, getting ready to start college. So we'll hear about all these updates. I guess I want to begin our conversation today by you guys catching us up on what has happened at Tierra Soul. What kind of updates, developments? There were a lot of things in the works a year ago, how those things panned out, which things have gone sideways, which things have taken root. We can't wait to hear it. So go for it.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yes.
I'm Krista Arias, and we are a mother and daughter. Right now, we're really a family. Originally we were a mama and a papa with two little ones doing urban farming, tending goats in the city. We just wanted to have raw milk. I guess that was how it started. And it was easier to go out once a month to bring alfalfa in than to go every week to pick up raw milk. So when Fia was about, she's 18 now, she was about 2, we got our first goats in the city. And so a lot has evolved since then. And now today, that 2-year-old, now 18, and these days, a lot of my identity is as a mother. Interestingly, as they're in these teenage years, I thought I would be having relief, or it would be less work, but it's actually, I feel it's almost like they're newborns again. I mean, it's wonderful. So yes, that's what's coming to me right now about who I am. But we have this project called Tierra Soul that we really kind of, I guess, started when Fia was little. I think officially we named it in 2008, somewhere around there. And since we originally started, we in the city in Portland, Oregon, we moved to New Mexico. And last time we talked, we were full swing running the member cafe.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot, about all the logistics going on there. Yeah.
And
I'm Fia. I am the goat-loving 2-year-old that grew up to be still very goat-loving. And I probably spend most of my time on the farm working with the animals and taking care of them. And still sorting it all out. Last time, I think I talked a lot about figuring out transitioning from homeschooling to college and what that might look like. Mm-hmm. I did a quarter of college at a really wonderful school, and I enjoyed that. I also worked in a little Waldorf preschool for a year, so I've kind of been doing a bunch of different things lately. And I am now taking a gap year.
A goat year.
A goat year, yes.
A goat gap year. That's great.
Yeah, just slowing down and figuring out what direction I want to go. And I think also remembering and realizing that there's not such a rush as so many people make it out to be and put on it, this kind of transition right now.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to just kind of take a step back and spend time with my family and the farm and meditate a little bit on what I want to do going forward.
That's brilliant, because I think most of us in our more advanced years might admit that what did we know when we were 18 about really what we really wanted to do? And also that we're always a work in progress, and this shifts. And so you don't have to feel pressure to make big decisions, especially at this point. Especially if you love what you're doing and where you are right now. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Your mom had, at some point in our correspondence, mentioned St. John's College. That's in Santa Fe, right?
Yes.
Got your eye on
So,
that for next year,
yeah.
maybe?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting place. I visited there. Am I correct to think there's one up here in Annapolis as well, near us? Well, how about that? Well,
Yeah.
So last time we talked, there was a lot going on down there in New Mexico with your cafe, a lot of figuring out how that was going to work. I think y'all had just transitioned to, what was it? Wasn't exactly a church, or was it?
It was a church.
Yeah, okay.
So the bakery church.
Yeah, so talk about that whole thing and where that's gone, as much as you want to.
It's been a while. I think kind of shortly after the episode came out, we actually temporarily closed the cafe, and we haven't actually opened again. So it's been a year, and things just sort of unfolded with some travels and some different directions. But so the cafe was really wonderful. We always dream about it, and every time we come in, we're actually sitting in the cafe space right now. And whenever
So you're
we're
in New
here,
Mexico right now.
We're in New Mexico, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And whenever we are in here, we're like, we need to start again. And there were a lot of pieces to it. One of the pieces to us temporarily closing had to do with just figuring out that member structure and what is the private domain and what is a membership model and how do they interface with governmental institutions and their oversight and involvement in food. So we were kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticked, or just, experimenting in a pretty small, intimate community, So two things that happened. One thing is that it was very successful and it grew and it was wonderful. And we were baking bread and pizza in 100-year-old little antique little gas stove ovens and one of the oven doors broke, and it was just a lot of work to bake that way.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I said after we closed was, I don't want to do this again until I have better ovens because it was very, very exhausting to begin with, but just doing that kind of work, but also as rewarding as it was. And as kind of natural as it is for us to just be cooking for people, it would take 10 minutes to make a pizza. Mm-hmm. And we were imitating what it would be like in a, wood-fired
Fast
pizza
food.
oven. It was a sourdough dough, and we're in this room, and the sun is beating in the window, and we've got these hot ovens that aren't insulated, just pouring heat into the room. And we'd have people come in and say, we want 6 pizzas, and it would take us 45 minutes to get those out, So
Yeah.
we just need a more efficient, of course we didn't want to really get much bigger than we were actually, but even to sustain that was hard. So we were exhausted. So that's why we haven't really started again. But thinking about sovereignty and about responsibility, about reciprocity, some really fundamental kind of lost old world cultural values and underpinnings that really need to be thought through and need to be understood and foundational if you're going to be functioning outside of the legal system. Because the legal system is set up to protect, one way I've heard it spoken about is that the legal system is set up to protect us in the context that we're currently living, which is really as children, not as responsible, accountable, reciprocal community members embedded in villages or communities. So there's lots of dimensions to why we're not doing that anymore. And the, questions of, is it possible to sort of step out of that? We see how industrial agriculture functions. We see how the restaurant industry cuts corners to increase margins, profit margins. To begin with the restaurant industry, it's like you work for every nickel. It's known to be hard work. And so there's a lot of pressure, I think, on restaurateurs to cut corners. And I can see how easily it could get dangerous. I mean,
yeah. So, what you're describing there about the problem, the example you gave about the pizzas, like someone wants 6 pizzas and it's like scaling up. It's doing things to scale, to serve beyond your family or, a certain group. And when you think about, the village values and, the codes of behaviors become legal codes, that's like the evolution, because as we move past the village life, those other entities take over the forming of those codes. So what happens when it leaves the purview of our innate responsibility and becomes more a product of capitalism?
It relates to slow living, I think, in the sense of it's only in slow living that we can responsibly offer or make this gesture of cooking for the community.
Yeah.
Because that's the point you make of like scaling up. So I guess it was, to a degree, it's like, so at what point does this get bigger than is safe, say, for example?
Yeah.
But then it also gets into very, deep philosophical questions about, is life about being safe? Is that why, is that the primary value? I don't know. I have this article that I wrote a long time ago, and there's a quote from, I think, from C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia. And it's like Aslan, the big lion, speaking. And he says something about, I'm going to completely misquote it probably, but he says something about safe. You're asking me if it's safe? That's not the point.
Oh.
The question is it good? And it's sort of an interesting distinction. I have 2 kids. I'm always worrying about them, so it's not necessarily that like maybe in the good, safety has a place, but if you lose the good and just default to safe, there's something lost. I don't know.
It's interesting. It's really interesting because, again, the village values, I'm calling it, I don't know if it's called that, but when that is deferred, then is there less personal responsibility? And is that where, in terms of all, the codes and the restaurants and the all that kind of stuff, is that where you get into cutting corners? Because if you can get around that, this other entity made this rule. It's not an internal rule.
Right.
And you get to cutting corners. That gets unsafe.
Right. We see that industrial farming, like you might not eat a regular commercial battery egg and immediately become sick and die. But we do know that there are consequences, physiological consequences, but also spiritual consequences when we're not honoring, the animals that we're eating.
Yeah. So, okay. Fia, I want to ask you about the whole cafe thing. And from your perspective, what did you see going on, and what do you see? What ideas do you have for moving it forward? And y'all are sitting in that sweet little space. I can see it. It's just precious. I want to go sit there and have coffee and pizza and all those things.
Yeah.
in community, you know, I want this. I want this. I want your cafe.
Yes. Well, so do I. I learned a lot from our time doing that and observing the way that food connects people and grounds people and builds community, and the changes that we saw in the community and in individuals through running this space. And, you know, it wasn't our intention, oh, we're going to open a cafe to sell a lot of food. We didn't really have a specific plan when we started. It was just kind of, we cook this good food because we want to eat this, and we love to share it with people when we have the opportunity. So let's, you know, open our doors a little bit and see if that's something that other people would be drawn to. And we were actually somewhat surprised by how many people really took to it and really saw the vision and felt the warmth of this space that was created through, you know, this food that was made with love, and our little record player scratching along. And it was, you know, a little bit like stepping back in time, or anytime you came in, you were sure to meet a friend or
Make a friend.
make a friend, and everyone was always talking to each other. And, you know, you didn't have everyone in the corner on their cell phones, or, you know, sometimes someone came in to do a little bit of computer work, but even that rarely
That was
happened.
very rare.
Because people wanted to be together and feeling that community and connection. And so I definitely see us doing that again in the future, because it's beautiful and it's an important part, I think, of what farming is to me. It's, you know, providing good food for my family and for others whenever we can.
And it's at a scale. I think something that we're doing that is, I don't know if it's unique, but it's particular. But when we look at what we're doing, we're not like trying to be a big farm, even organic, that is providing like a market farm, like that's providing a lot of produce and meat, et cetera, for the community. Part of that is because we're allergic to getting involved in all of the trappings and all of those rules.
Yeah.
And so that kind of resistance has kind of kept us in this particular domain, which is not about us being the farmer for others, but more of us being maybe an inspiration or a model. Like we don't want to sell a ton of milk. We want to help you produce your own milk, or produce the onions that you would trade for the milk, and like to create networks.
And to show that, you know, you don't have to be big, like having started with urban farming. There is so much that you can do in your apartment. Yeah. And I think that in these times, that's something that's really important, because a lot of people struggle to, you know, afford to buy meat from regenerative farms and things like this. And so if instead we can help support people to do what they can for themselves and build sustainability as a whole, which kind of comes to our holistic approach in homesteading, is it's not about me or you or we raise pigs and just pigs. It's all of this holistic approach of bringing everything together and understanding how all of us matter, and all of us moving in this direction is important. And if we just get really big and we're just doing it, that's not actually necessarily making a difference for the whole.
And Lady Farmer, we talk about these things, these skills and these experiences as simply, you're taking a step back from these systems
Mm-hmm.
so that you can observe the system better. You know, if you're standing in something, you can't really see it. Like, you know, just step back from it. And, you know, what is it like to actually eat something that you actually grew? You know, it could be in your windowsill or the tomato out there on the porch, or, you know, whatever. We say it so much. But just that experience of removing the whole industry, the distance, the labor, all the things that go into getting that tomato on your plate. What's it like to have one out there on your porch? And it creates, you know, an awareness, the ability to observe and think about these things. Same with your, you know, your clothing. You know, what is it like not to buy that new thing, to go thrift or go look in your closet? You know, just actually thinking through these things is huge. So when I hear you all talk about the cafe, there are a couple things come to mind. First thing is, have you heard of this third space concept? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it seems like. Mm-hmm. It's you're creating a space for community, for reciprocation, for communication, all these things that we attribute to, you know, being humans living together, village life, exchanging ideas. The salon, you know, you can go back through history and think of so many iterations of this. Mm-hmm. But where it gets complicated is the food part, because of the systems, the legalities, the safety. And so what you guys are describing is just what it's like to be pioneers, what it's like to be pioneers and figuring it out, and how to serve food in a third space within a system, because to a certain extent we have to work within the system or find ways to go around it without getting in trouble. So kudos to you for you know, taking that journey and trying to figure it out. And if you have to take a break every now and then and figure stuff out before you go on to the next phase, so be it. So you have any idea of when you might give it another crack? I guess what actually happened was that you just ran into rules and stuff and problem scaling, and you're just like, okay, pause. We got to, yeah.
And then life kind of took us in another direction with Fia working at the preschool in another state, you know, back in Oregon, and doing a semester of college. And so we just kind of went with that and took the break. And I was really thinking through the sovereignty thing, and I actually came to a point where I was like, it doesn't need to be a church. It can just, there's, you know, it can function in the private domain as a members only private club, basically. So that feels pretty comfortable. I think the next thing that we're going to do is that we're having a live event on our property, and we're going to cook for people there. And I think that's going to be our next foray into food.
So tell us about the gathering and how, you know, what has led up to it and what it looks like, and we just want to hear all about it.
Well, I think it partly comes out of the Lazy Lady Living,
which I want to talk
about, the online program. Basically, a brief introduction is that we've been teaching this course for over 15 years, on and off, and always people are like, they want to come and learn with us and
do something,
hands-on.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we did was we ran the bed and breakfast so people could come and stay with us, and we did farm tours and stuff, but it was very limited. Whereas now we have the space, you know, we have this 65 acres in the canyon where we can have the beginnings of a gathering. It's slowly evolving. Every year it'll probably evolve a little bit more, but right now it's small. We don't have a huge amount of infrastructure. We don't, you know, so it's going to be camping, and we're going to do a lot of presentations and hands-on workshops that relate to Lazy Lady Living, the program.
I see.
Yeah, so we're calling it a holistic homesteading festival.
Wonderful.
And gather and give. And so I think kind of our dream is to, much like the cafe, keep it small enough and intimate enough that we can really get to know everyone and spend time together and build community, and not, I think a lot of events, you know, they're so big that you don't really get to talk to most people, and the presenters are kind of a whole separate thing, and you don't really interact with them. And we're hoping for something different, kind of like with the cafe. We weren't like, let's run a restaurant. We wanted to build connection and community and share real food and useful skills, and bring together a lot of wonderful people.
Yeah. I think that Fia touched on it a little bit. It's going to be a festival in the sense of like a celebration, a seasonal celebration, a coming together, happening on the weekend of the equinox. Where it's a festival in the sense more in like an old world, sort of different from a conference or a music festival or something like that, but more like a community festival or a village festival where the community comes together and that we learn together. And one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is the gap between the presenters, the sort of famous presenters, and the attendees, and how that functions in the world, to not necessarily be bringing the whole forward, where there's one person and then there's 300 people in the audience listening, sort of, fanning over this one person.
And then afterwards, everyone circled around this one poor person. I know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Having been to so many workshops across my lifetime of curiosities.
And like, for example, a place where mothers and children would be more
that the children
central.
Are actually included in the event. And
not even included, but centered.
Like it's
so that, because what else matters but that core, the root of the community is the mother and child. So I think that one of the things that has influenced me has been my participation in Indigenous ceremonies, and seeing how certain things function really slow, really humble, lots of humor. One of the things that I always am moved by that seems to be present and lost is that, you get around, there's a baby in the group. Everyone just takes the baby, like turns with the baby. It's not a thing. Can you, or can I? It's just like, just happens. And I think that that's a sign of something. That's a sign that you're in reality, not fiction.
And it's fun. I know that's really precious time.
Like working together, eating together, cooking together, building, thinking together.
And this is soon. This is like at the time of this recording, it's a month away.
Yes.
Are you ready? Or are you just going to let it flow?
Well, I mean, the thing about slow living is that it's a surrender. So, we're really practicing non-attachment to how many people come. If one person comes, we'll be there for them. I mean, there'll be more than one person. We know already, but
this is a good research year.
Yeah.
Is this something you think you'll repeat? You don't know. You don't know until you do it.
We would like to continue to do something on the equinox. We'll see how it goes, in terms of like having our family. And, a lot of people are like, we just want to learn from you and your family. And some people like the idea of learning from different people. That's a little more complicated to organize, but it also then cross-pollinates in different communities. So will it continue to be 10 people who come and just learn with our family every year? Or is it going to grow to be, like 100 people would be the max that we would ever even want to grow to?
And what are you calling it? The Holistic Homesteading Festival?
It's called Gather and Give.
And Give. I love that.
A Holistic Homesteading Festival. Yeah, that's this tagline.
Wonderful. So, okay. Now, I would love to dive into the Lazy Lady Living, which is your signature course. The way you have communicated and shared your knowledge and educated so many, including myself, I'll tell the little story briefly that I ran across it in the Weston Price Wise Traditions catalog. I think my husband pointed it out to me, said, you might like this. And I looked at it and I thought, yeah, I'm doing it. And I think we had only been here on this property a year or two. And I knew that I had a lot to learn. I just was really, really pulled to it. And it's just fantastic. It's got all this really great information, just packed full of content, really well done. So you've done a great job with it. And I have revisited it now. I'm in the third time, and talk about slow living. Really slow. Life keeps rearing its head, but it's still great. And the books, the reading requirements are just classic, fundamental works in this area that everybody should read if they're interested in this stuff. And so anyway, that's my little testimonial. And so, both of you talk about lazy lady living, the whole thing from the concept to the name of it. It's all great.
And you did it, Mary,
Early.
15 years ago? Maybe?
Well, I want to say, we moved out here in
2014, maybe 10 years ago.
I think it was 2014. By the time I was like, hey, what am I going to do here? So I'd say 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
And I still frequently go back in and look at parts of it, and then trying to work my way back through it for a third time, because it's just very rich content, and you don't just read something and know something, and it's just like all there. It's just you have to kind of practice it.
And it's not so much that it's full of information to learn as much as it's layered, profound, and one can always reconsider one of the principles and be reminded of how one is applying it.
And it's about so much more than, it is permaculture is kind of the backbone of it. It's about so much more than that.
Yeah, it has probably 5 equal deep influences, permaculture being one, the Weston A. Price, the traditional foods, being another. Of course, when we started 10 or 15 years ago, things have shifted, I think that there is much more awareness. And
I'd love to hear what you say about that, of your clientele, I guess you'd call them, or your students. Where are they coming in and what are they looking for? And has that shifted? Yeah. Or do you know?
Yeah, I think that what has happened is that people originally would be like, I'm interested in farming. And then they would be like, oh, there's all this other stuff to do with, the trauma and initiation pieces, and the apothecary, the herbalism pieces, and then the ethical business and cultural creativity. Those would be kind of extras or something. Whereas now there's a lot more programs out there now. When we did it, we were one of the first online permaculture programs with actual online content that existed. And especially that addressed social permaculture or the spiritual permaculture. And there, originally back in the day, people would argue about whether it was okay to include spiritual content in a permaculture or social content in a permaculture course, and whether permaculture was about that or not. And whereas now, I think people would choose our program because it is really permeated and foundationally rooted in all of these, things. Even the way we use permaculture, it's not just about any of the principles that you would use to grow a plant in the soil. You would also apply to yourself or your community or your environment, etc. So, Lazy Lady Living, it's an 8-week online, we say, soulful permaculture program. I feel like permaculture is maybe the broadest category, but it does include trauma and what that does to the body. And we talk about birth and death. It's called Lazy Lady Living because when I was in graduate school, one of my graduate school stints, I I had a roommate, and she would always say, "I'm not lazy, I'm efficient."
Yeah.
And we were always joking because, we just like, the ways that you get through courses sometimes aren't always about, like in graduate school, the amount of reading, no one ever does all the reading. It's impossible, in fact. So you have to figure out how to be efficient with how you're going through the material. So anyway, we would sort of joke about that. So the idea is that a lot of homesteading, the truth is that it can be really overwhelming and exhausting, and you can start setting yourself up for like kind of a double life, who you pretend to be and who you actually are. And because if you are trying to farm by applying information to your project, you will be overwhelmed. And the philosophy of lazy lady living is like, what do we do? How do we embark on this journey? And what do we need to take with us and learn in order to, it's really about to actually live a life of simplicity and the slow life in comparison to the fast life.
Yeah. Another version of slow living is.
Yeah. Lazy is like slow. Simple, simple, slow. And because I think when you start farming, most of the advice out there's zones and there's, companion plants and which ones go with which.
Soil
and then soil analysis and mapping out like all of your plants, and then which ones will you plant together, and then like you plant them and then one of them doesn't grow, or none of them grow, or only the weeds grow. And so permaculture is really, it does stem from traditional and indigenous ways, land use.
These new ideas are not so new.
And so there's a way to, live that is, I don't know, what's a good example, maybe?
Fia, I'll let you answer that question. What do you think of the phrase, lazy? Obviously, you've been living with it for 10 years as your family has evolved this course, and it has shifted over the years. I've noticed
things have been woven in.
Yeah. So what is it? What does it mean to you actually, like lazy lady living? And why the lady? Okay, I'm just picking y'all's brain here. I have my own ideas, but
well, it's honestly a little bit hard to speak to because I have grown up in it.
Yes,
it's
been
very
immersed.
much just foundational to who I am, the way I live my life, and the way I interact with other people and the earth and the animals. So I remember talking last time about that the principle of the smallest thing that will make the biggest difference, and how that's kind of what lazy lady living is to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really work a lot with the animals. That's kind of my area. And it's true, there are a lot of people working on big scale projects, adding lots of animals. Even, regenerative agriculture can get really big and really overwhelming. And to me, that's then separating from the slow living that to me is really important, because part of this way of farming is not just doing good things with the animals, but being connected to the animals that we are raising and knowing them, and not getting to a point where everything is so complicated or overwhelming or big or busy that I can't know each of my goat friends by name, or know the quirks in their personality, or be able to tell when something's not right, or know which trees on our property have been grazed on by the goats recently and which haven't. And I really value being able to be that connected, because I don't just want to be a regenerative farmer. I want to be connected farmer. And I want to know the land that I'm working with and the animals and my family, and have us all carry that connection and wholeness.
I think one thing, like for example, that we don't have a milking machine, and we're currently milking 8 goats, and Fia's milking them. You know, we may milk them by ourselves, usually Fia's, or we maybe have some guests who are helping, or I'll be doing it this coming week. But
many mornings I am milking 8 goats.
8 goats, yeah. And I will be milking 8 goats this week.
Yeah.
And I guess part of it is like a lot of people use milking machines, and
I get it. It's so much more efficient and so much simpler in many ways. And I really love the time to slow down and spend with each of our goats every morning. I like knowing exactly what's happening with the milk between, coming from the animal and being used.
Because you have to, it does something to you when you you're with the animals like that, and you're milking them, and you're touching, your skin is touching their skin. And it's just a different, if you think about biodynamic agriculture and like the spiritual forces that go into our food and the intimate relationship of the animal giving you its milk, like letting down its milk for you, and having that reciprocity and thanking it as you're milking it with your, hand.
It's time to really show your respect and value, and that you are willing to take the time to spend with this animal, and it's fulfilling for you, and I think for them as well.
I think it's very beautiful and rare for a person your age, or really anybody, to value that in itself for what it is. And that's, I think, a big part of the whole lazy lady living concept. Just valuing certain things that have suffered from a lack of value in our current system, or systems and world culture. And I want to talk about the lady part. I have my own thoughts on that, and just curious about what y'all have to say about that. Like, why wouldn't you just call it lazy living?
Well, it's interesting because I had a friend and colleague. We did a long interview actually about this. I should dig it out and send it to you because you would just appreciate it in general. But she maybe called it like a feminist permaculture, because she identified a sort of tone difference between our program and sort of like other permaculture programs that, predominantly are taught by men and they don't necessarily have all this sort of, they don't talk about, free birth and, home funerals and, full moons and et cetera. So a distinction I would say, like maybe it's like a matriarchal expression, maybe lens, I was going to say take, or, but it's a mother's permaculture, really.
Yeah. I really appreciate that about it. And the matriarchal lens, because the earth does embody the feminine, or the feminine is embodied in the earth. I don't know which way you would say it.
I'd say it is
both.
A mother.
Mother. The earth is the mother. And very fundamentally, I feel like this is where we've been separated. Going back to when, I don't know. But where we've been separated from this idea of the earth is, our ultimate sustenance and nurturance, and when and how and where we forgot this, and this trajectory has gotten us here. So I love the reminder of that, and how do you inculcate that in an entire culture? You talk about it, you expose it, you bring it up, you yeah.
And you're
And-
honest about the reality. You're honest about, you tell the truth. And plenty of men have taken the course too.
Sure.
And sometimes I throw in like, and lad, you know.
Yeah.
But it is, I think over the years, it has become clear to me that this was, you know, my husband and I, we did the course together, but that this is particularly and clearly my interpretation as a birth keeper, as a death, a threshold activist, as a mother, as a ceremony participant.
Really relates to the way you've raised Shoko and I, and how different that is from Lenore. And
so when we were thinking about Lady Farmer, we thought just the name Lady Farmer and just sort of popped into our head because just on a surface level, we live in an area where there's a lot of young women farmers, and we thought that's so cool. And it is so cool. And I think it's indicative of, kind of maybe the birthing of a new consciousness, so to speak, really male dominated field. Women are coming into it with this sort of newfound passion and desire to work with the earth, the whole permaculture idea that we're going to cooperate with nature and not fight against it. Not to say every woman farmer is along these lines, but it's kind of a philosophy that sort of fit what we saw happening around us. And also, if you go back, even in the Greek myths, which is just very patriarchal, Demeter, or Demeter, however you want to say it, she fed the world. She was responsible for the feeding of humanity. And you know that story. Do you know the story, Fia? I bet you do. Where Demeter and Persephone is the daughter.
our first goat was actually named Persephone.
Persephone. Yeah. And it just, Emma and I are mother-daughter team. You're a mother-daughter team. And that story, it's the woman that's in charge of feeding humanity. And that was the Greeks, and since that time, we sort of flipped that around in a lot of ways. So anyway, there you go. Any comments?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I don't know. Recently, it's making me think of this story. Recently, I was talking to someone about like a teaching about plants from a curandera in Mexico. And she said that the plant can, when a trauma comes to a community, the local plants can change what they're good for. Basically, they can adapt to help people with whatever traumas they're dealing with. And I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, that's like mother's milk. When a mother is nursing a baby, if the baby is sick, the milk changes. Depending on the age of the baby, her milk changes. If she's so sick, the milk changes. If it's like early in the day, late in the day, if there's something going on in the environment, the mother will, her milk changes. And that's, that's been known for a while, but kind of newly scientifically understood, but that the plants can do the same thing. And, the earth, if you think of the earth as the mother, that's the earth mother's body.
Yeah. Being
able to, because people, it seems like that's, a plant is good for what it's good for. But if you, I know like with cannabis, and since it's been legalized, they're testing things, and same strain being tested with different farmers, depending on their inputs, depending on, what kind of light they're using, et cetera, et cetera. They're different, so it's not totally unheard of, but that, echinacea, for example, could be, we think of it always as an immune herb, but that it could one day, if there was a trauma, it could shift and help us with something else. That is like, that's the matriarch, that's the power of the female.
And sort of antithetical to science, study-based evidence, all those things that we're so trained to follow, and that we have going all the way back to our discussion about, having these things interface with, our systems and our legalities. It's a conundrum. And I just think we just have to be open and listening and embracing these things that come our way, and thoughtful and observant, and be ready to experiment and try new things. Like there you are, your cafe, your gathering, so many things, so many outside the box, outside the system way of doing things. Your parenting, and Fia, your gap year, and all these things. We hope to encourage and empower people to just be willing to step back, and feel like it's okay,
and to let stillness be present. Let things come to stillness, and then let the next thing bubble up.
Yeah,
and then to have the courage to follow those things when they when they do bubble up.
Well, that might be a wonderful place to wrap it up. What else would y'all like to say? I'm not going to ask the good dirt and slow living questions, because we've been talking about slow living the whole time. Y'all answered good dirt last time, unless you have something you want to say about it, but I won't drag you there. But
I think that, like, even just what we were just talking about, the good dirt, the earth being wise and alive and present and listening and available.
Yeah. Adaptive.
And adaptive.
Responsive.
And nourishing. And with the lazy lady living, whatever course, thing, circle, learning, majigger. It really is about taking the space and time to remember some of the principles and philosophies and basic values that can help us recover that way. And there's nothing more important in a way than, slowly, not racing again, but slowly just starting to head in that direction, at least.
Yeah. And not just for ourselves, but for those to come.
Yeah.
And, all right. Well, thanks again, ladies. It's been a great catch up time, and we wish you all the luck with your gathering. And as you move forward in whatever's to come for Tierra Soul. So, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at WeAreLadyFarmer. That's WeAreLadyFarmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.